Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. I am really excited to have another guest with us on our show. This is Delton Cooper. Delton and I connected because we have a similar childhood story. It's interesting how our story is similar, but the way that it showed up, the way that we showed up in the world is actually a bit different. So our purpose for the show today is that we're going to share our childhoods with you guys, because the main point is both of us realized as adults that we really had some mental health challenges that were really exacerbated, I would say, by our childhood, and feel like there were a lot of things that were missed when we were kids in terms of us getting the support that we really needed at the time. So that's the point of our episode today is talking about that. So I'm going to have Delton introduce himself, and then we're just going to jump on in.
Thank you very much. First off, thank you, Steph, very much for having me on and taking the time out to kind of hear my story a little bit.
Yeah.
My name is Delton Cooper. I am a certified life coach, and I got into life coaching because I realized that there are a lot of people out there that are my age or around my age that are still kind of dealing with these concerns and these issues that weren't diagnosed till later on in life, like myself. And as I looked back, once I got diagnosed and the conditions were explained to me, I realized that there were a lot of things in my childhood that were missed, a lot of things that weren't interpreted correctly, and were just looked at as bad behavior or as just a kid acting out, when it really was something that needed to be dealt with on a on a different level. So that's what kind of inspired me, because I realized there are a lot of people out there that still to this day feel like they're broken, or they don't fit in, or that there's still something wrong with them. And there's really not. It's like we weren't broken, we weren't bad kids, we were just different. We were just
Misunderstood.
different. Yeah, we were just different.
Yeah, that's I do want to say that, I want to reiterate that Delton and I are going to be talking about mental health. So I just want to put that out there that we're not going to get into really ugly stuff, but I do just want everybody who's listening or watching to know that that's what this conversation is about.
Yes.
So I want to share some of the things that Delton and I have in common, and that is that we have both been diagnosed with ADHD. Mine came 2 years ago. That's when I got my diagnosis. Delton, when did you get yours?
Mine came about 12 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
And
both
I'm
of us,
50, so I was late 30s before I got diagnosed.
yeah, that's similar to me, about the
Yeah.
same age for me as well. We both also were identified as gifted as kids.
Mhm.
So there's that going on as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is that, Delton and we have this shared experience of feeling like we were different growing up, that
Mhm.
feeling
Yeah.
like there was something wrong with us growing up. But what's interesting is that we had different experiences in different environments. So one of the things
Okay.
that I want to talk about is just the idea that anytime, and this isn't just for kids, I would say this is universal. Anytime somebody is displaying what would typically be considered acting out behavior or inward behavior, right? So if they're being aggressive, if they're eloping, if they're isolating, if they're withdrawn,
Mhm.
anytime there's something like that that just isn't typical, there is a reason for that. And I think I know for me, I had two different times in my childhood where I was pretty extreme. And one was when I was about 4. And then the other one was when I was about 14, and that one lasted until I left home. But I was categorized when I was a teenager. I think when I was little, I was categorized as just being a difficult kid, right? I was just a difficult kid. And then when I was a teenager, I was a moody teenager. And both times, I think it was completely missed that I was not okay. There were definitely things going on with me. I really could have benefited from some professional support and intervention, both periods of my life. And so I think that's the first point that we both want to talk about, is just that anytime your child is acting in a way that is not typical of kids their age in general. I don't want to say not typical of them, because they may have acted this way for years, but that it's not typical of other kids their age. It deserves a lot of attention and consideration. I mean, it deserves somebody to, possibly consulting professionals and other people to see what's going on here. So for me, I know I can't speak to when I was 4 because I have no memory of that. But when I was in high school, I was significantly depressed. I mean, significantly. And nobody ever picked up on that, ever. It wasn't until I was a young adult and ended up in psychiatric treatment. It was never picked up on when I was in high school. So just to the point that when things are out of the ordinary, there's a reason. And I'm going to share I guess actually we'll talk about Delton, our home and school stories a little bit later, since that'll be our next point. But yeah, if you want to just speak to that too, about just recognizing that behaviors that are not typical of someone your age, how that's a sign, right? That's a red flag, if you will.
Definitely. I think one of the things that stood out for me as I think about it now, I was always around. Let's start with ages. I was probably, when I was about 7 or 8 years old, I was always like the nice kid, the smiley kid, the goofy kid. Let's have fun. Let's have fun. But eventually, it just changed suddenly, and all of a sudden, I was the reserved kid at home, where all I did was stayed in my room.
And this was before smartphones.
Yeah, this was before smartphones. So I was in there just, I don't even know what I was doing. I was just in my room. I just didn't want to be dealing with, you know, the environment outside my door. So, and I think that you have to recognize that kids, they have their age group. They have a certain group of friends that are usually around their age. And I can remember vividly, I never had friends my own age until I was in high school. They were always much older or much younger, and I never fit in with my group, with the other kids that were outside having fun and playing and doing their things. I would always find either the much older, the adults, or I would play with the little kids.
Can I speak to that, Delton?
Yeah.
So it's super common in kids who are neurodivergent. Younger kids tend to allow us to be in charge. They tend to allow us to be the leader. And so we like that, right? We like being able to be in charge. And older kids, sometimes especially if we have been diagnosed as gifted, right? We tend to just feel more comfortable with older kids because the maturity levels, intellectually speaking, at least, can be more similar. But yeah, it's very common that neurodivergent kids don't find their place amongst other kids their age, because the intellectual maturity may be different, but also the social maturity is different in the opposite way, right? Yes. So your intellectual maturity is probably higher, but your social maturity is lower. And so then it's like pick one or the other, but you can't be, your own age.
There was no middle ground at all.
Yeah.
There was no middle ground. There was either the older adults, I mean, like older adults, like, older than my mom. I could hang around them all day and we could have conversations, and, I would love it. And then I can hang around the kids and we have fun all day and all that. But it's like with my age group, I didn't understand the way they thought about life. The way they processed information did not make sense to me. So I couldn't really bond with kids. And like I was expressing to Steph that I think I can count on one hand how many close friends I've had in my whole life because I just cannot connect with people in my demographic,
Yeah.
and that went for male and female.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's difficult trying to live in three different worlds because you're in the older adult world. You have to function in your age range, but you really want to play with the kids because they're more fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great, man. That's a great visual, right? I mean, I can see. And yeah, for me personally, in our program here at Starfish, we don't separate kids by age. And that's exactly why, right? Some of our kids feel much more comfortable around older kids, and some of them feel more comfortable around younger kids. But because all of my kids here are neurodivergent, they also feel really comfortable with their own age peers. But it's because they're all neurodivergent, right? And
Yeah.
so and sometimes I know there's a concern that maybe the older kids will be talking about older kids stuff. Nope. They're not. That's not going on. They're not talking about things that typical 17-year-olds would be talking about. So sometimes I think that's a concern, but nope.
No, it doesn't happen. And I can speak from my own experience, you know, as a, 9, 10-year-old talking to the 15, 16-year-olds, we're talking about the same stuff, but it's on
Yeah.
different levels. We're
Yeah.
talking about bikes. I might be talking about my bike, but they've got a better bike.
Yeah.
They've got, little bells and whistles on it, but they're doing big boy tricks on their bikes. And so for me, and I think part of it also is when you're in that mindset, you're always looking for a challenge.
Mm.
And those older kids give you that challenge. It challenges you, it makes you think, it makes you work out really tough problems.
Oh, that's
And
such a
then
great insight.
the kids, they let you relax. They
Oh,
let you actually be yourself. You can be
that's
genuine
such
with
a
them.
great insight.
Yeah. And I think that's why I fit into those two groups so well because the older group challenged me.
Yeah.
And they when they realized how smart I was, they challenged me more.
I love that so much. It's
Yeah.
making me think of a specific student here in the program that will gravitate toward. I remember one day, one of the older kids, we were having a really intellectual conversation. I don't even remember what the topic was, but it was things that this kiddo didn't understand. It was intellectual concepts that he just had not been exposed to because he's like 9,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
came over and he's like, what are you guys talking about? And
That
he
was me.
was
Yeah.
fascinated with our conversation. But at the same time, he loves being around kids who are younger or maybe have a different skill level than him because he's seen as a role model in that type of environment, right? So on the one hand, he really likes learning things that he's never heard before, but he also likes being seen as somebody who's competent and, like a good model.
Yeah. And an extra little benefit from talking to the kids that I remember is when you explain something to somebody, you get a better understanding yourself.
Yes.
So as you're teaching them something, you're learning something. So it's still challenging because now you're trying to get something. Oh, I didn't think about that, but okay, now I got this now. I'm gonna take this
Yeah.
back to the older kids and tell them, so, but nowhere in there was I thinking about my own age.
Yeah.
They weren't even a part of my thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, as an adult, that doesn't matter at all, right? As an adult, it does not matter what other people you choose to have in your network. It only matters when you're a kid.
Exactly. And it's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah. But then it becomes an issue on the playground, right? Or in PE class or at lunchtime. If that's when it really starts to become a social issue is when your day. So for example, if you're in middle school, you're only around kids your own age. There's only a 3-year gap in middle school. So that's when it really can start to affect our kids is when that's their environment the majority of the time, and they feel different, they feel out of place, they feel like there's something wrong with them. So I do think a big part of it is letting our kids be around whoever reinforces their uniqueness, whoever makes them feel strong, right? You know, I had a parent who their kid was little and he liked to talk to the neighbor who was like his grandfather's age. Awesome. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure that's really reinforcing for both of them, you know? But I definitely, when our kids are in school, most of their day is kids their own age. So I feel like we have to find the balance. We have to allow them to spend time around other people who really bring out the best in them, but also teach them the skills and strategies to relate to kids their own age, right? I feel like there's got to be a balance, at least when we're kids. When you're an adult, you know, do whatever. But when we're kids and we're in the school system, I think it's in even like one strategy that I'll just throw out there is often I notice that kids don't know what their same age peers are talking about. So it could be, you know, pop culture things, the latest game, the latest, you know, meme that's going around. So even if your kid doesn't care about it, at least expose them to it. So whether it's Minecraft or, like I said, you know, memes or whatever it is that the kids their age are into and talking about, at least expose them to it so they know what other kids are talking about and they can have a conversation if they choose to. I would say that's a big thing. A lot of our kids aren't capable of talking about things other than their certain interests because they don't know about them. Right. So how can you talk about something else if you have zero frame of reference for it? So that's just one strategy I want to throw out there. Okay. The next thing that we want to talk about is another thing to pay attention to is if your kiddo acts different in different environments. Okay. And this could be that this is going to be interesting because Delton and I have like reverse stories. But it could even be, it could even be if you have a split household and your kiddo acts very differently in mom's house versus dad's house, right? That could be something to think about. For Delton and me, it has to do with home and school. It could be even for kids who come here, starfish versus school. I've seen that a lot. So that's the second kind of topic is if your kiddo is acting very differently in different environments, that's something to really be aware of. So in my situation, I was a model student the whole time I was in school. I got in trouble one time in my entire school career. I still remember the whole story because that's how big of a deal it was to me that I got in trouble one time. It was elementary school and there was a boy I had a crush on and I pushed him down on the playground, and got my card pulled for that. For those of us who know the red, green, yellow card system. So that's the only time in school that I ever got in trouble. And so in my school career, there were never, I don't think it would have been realistic for anybody in my school career to think that there was anything concerning going on with me because I was an honor roll student, very high in my class. I was always at school. I didn't have attendance issues. You know, I wasn't, like I said, never in trouble. I was in honors classes. At home, I was running away. I was drinking. I was smoking pot. I was sneaking out. I was very argumentative with my parents. The relationship was very, very negative. And I think there's a lot of things I was doing that my parents have no idea I was even doing. I think if they hear this, I'm sure they would be like, oh, you know, I think there's things that they don't even know. But so my behavior between those two environments was significantly different. And that's something to to look
Yeah.
at, right? I mean, that's something that at some point somebody should have said, there's something not right here. There's something going on. And Delton, you had kind of the opposite.
I mean, totally opposite. I'm sitting here laughing now because you said I got in trouble one time at school, and I was like, um, I think I would get in trouble at least once a day. I mean, honestly, my school, you know, and 'cause I went to a little small private school, so it was probably 30 of us in a class, but I stayed constantly in trouble. I was always in trouble. I was always the disruptive kid. I was always the kid that didn't want to do his homework, or the one that was always talking in class, or the one that always had something smart to say. You know, it
By
was
smart,
something.
you mean smart ass.
Smart ass. Yes, definitely. Definitely. No, not intelligent, smart ass. Yeah. And it was one of those things where I would go home, and like I said earlier, I would just stay in my room. I would shut down. I mean, I would just turn my TV on and 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 play my Atari 2600, you know, and all that stuff. And to this day, it's like I'm a what do they call it? I'm a TV, like an old school TV like fanatic. I can name every TV show. I've seen every episode because that was my home life. I would literally come home, throw my stuff on the floor, turn the TV on, and just that's it.
Check out.
Check out. Yeah. But then I would go to school. And as soon as I walk through the door, it's showtime. Yeah. And I did everything I could to simply, you know, and even to this day, I don't you know, I understand where it came from because, you know, but I still don't understand why it was so extreme.
Mm-hmm.
But I also had some other stuff going. You know, I had a mother that had an anger problem at home, so it was always just a matter of avoiding her. You know, it wasn't any quality time spent. I just wanted to stay away from her, so I would go in my room and lock down. And but the times that she did interact with me were not the best. You know, there
Mm-hmm.
were, you know, a lot of discipline doled out, and a lot of screaming and yelling and all that stuff. So I made it a point to stay in my room, to stay out of the way. Kind of like, okay, you can have it now. You know, whatever you're doing out there, that's fine. Just leave me alone. And and something else I want parents to understand is that those few interactions, if they're not loving and caring, they weigh on kids.
Mm-hmm.
They weigh on kids because they don't have an outlet. They can't lash back out at you.
Mm-hmm.
They can't yell at you. They can't, you know, say that you're a bad parent. You know, they can't let that come out of their mouth. So they hold it
I
all
have to
in.
disagree with you here because I did all of those things.
And see, that's my exact opposite. And like at school, it's like I couldn't imagine going a day without, you know, some sort of at least some sort of correction on something.
Yeah. I want you to tell your check mark story. But just to stay with I would yell at my parents. I remember the one thing that really set my parents off the most was when I would curse at them. Which sometimes it would come out of my mouth
Never.
without any intention. It's just what came out of my mouth.
Oh God, that was a death sentence in my house.
Yeah, but I think I was spanked a lot. And I remember one time when I was hit and I didn't understand, I don't know why. And that was kind of the theme of my, I don't know why I'm in trouble. I don't know what I did. And so one time I hit back and I said, don't ever do that again. So I think like your response was to withdraw and mine was to lash out. But we're both feeling the same thing, right? We're both feeling it creates this sense because, you know, as a kid, your only understanding of the world is through what you experience, right? And we are meaning making machines. And so our brains experience life and then they go to work trying to make meaning of it. And so the only meaning that you can make as a kid is that this is your fault. Right? You are doing, there's something wrong with you. You are doing something wrong. You are being wrong. You are wrong. And so, you know, Delton and I both have that story now that we are wrong, that there's something wrong with us. And it's pervasive. It's very, very difficult to move yourself out of that story. If that's the story that you've had your whole life, it's very difficult to move yourself out of that.
Yes.
So, okay. Check
Yeah.
marks.
Yeah, check marks. And before we get to that, I want to go back to what you were talking about with the spankings.
Yeah.
And I was like you, I got a ton of spankings, but back to what we said before, I reacted totally different. I like you lashed out, and I got to the point where I just shut down. It's like she would whip me, and I wouldn't even cry. I would just look at her, and eventually she realized that this wasn't working, so she stopped. I didn't have to lash out. It's just I just learned how to just shut my.
Yeah.
And what I learned now, that's a common sign for people that are being abused. They learn how to tune themselves out from the situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely understand about the spankings, and eventually and if you guys are out there and you're spanking your kids, they're going to hit that point where they're
One
either
or
going
the
to take,
other, right?
they're
Either
going to be
your
one or
point
the
or
other.
my point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're going to hit one of our points, either mine or yours.
Yeah.
There's no other options. There's no other options. And
Did spanking ever cause you to change your behavior?
never. It made it worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it was, and I think I mentioned this to you before the interview here, is that I got to the point where I got whooped and I got, spanked, what do you want to call it? The physical discipline, that I just started doing whatever I wanted to do
Because it
because I
didn't
figured
matter,
it
right?
didn't matter. I'm going to get punished either way it goes.
Yeah.
If I do right, if I do wrong, I'm still going to get punished. If I did it, if I didn't do it, if I don't, if I'm just sitting here, yeah, I might get a whooping, just for sitting here.
And I want to say too that this
Yeah.
isn't just about physical punishment. This can be shaming your child verbally. This could be ignoring, like intentionally ignoring them because you don't like something, so like, let's say they get in trouble at school. And so you spend the rest of the evening ignoring them. Right. So this doesn't even have to be physical punishment. It's basically any artificial consequence that we come up with. I got grounded all the time. This was before cell phones, but I had my own landline phone. And so when I got older, that became the punishment, was they would take my phone away, but I always knew where they hid it. So I would just go get it and plug it back in.
Yeah.
I mean, like I became very defiant,
And I think parents need to know, and they need to realize that, no, if it's physical or not, it all hurts the same.
Yeah.
It's all soul crushing.
Yeah.
It's no just spanking and they get over it. It doesn't, you might want to believe that, or okay, we're fine now because they're acting normal again the next day. But that's soul crushing. That leaves an imprint on every time you do that. It leaves a scar, it leaves a nick, it leaves an imprint on your child. And if he's already not fitting in anywhere else, and then you're laying that on top of what they're already going through. I mean, you're I hate to use it, but the best word is you're traumatizing them day by day, day in, day out. It's trauma every single day, because no matter if you're yelling, if you're hitting, if it's just a pop in the head, if it's just a scream, or you're stupid, it all hurts the same. Don't ever think that because you don't hit them, you're not hurting them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I would imagine, obviously people who listen to podcasts are on a growth journey, right?
Yes.
And so I think I would imagine that most of the people who are listening to this or watching this, most likely don't have a habit of being physically abusive toward their kids. But I think when we don't know what else to do, I think we sometimes resort to shaming our kids, right? I can't believe you did that. Do you want me to tell so-and-so that you did that?
Yes.
Do you, even threatening, which is, when I say threatening, I don't mean threatening to harm your child. I mean things like, if you don't stop doing that, I'm going to take your phone away. Right. I mean, like threatening like that, just the language we use with kids that causes them to feel less than, that causes them to feel like they're not good enough and they are not enough. I think it creates this sense in our kids that we are not okay. That there is something inherently wrong with us. And like we have both said, using artificial consequences, not only is it not effective, because again, if you're having to do this day after day, year after year, clearly it's not effective, right? I mean, if you've been shaming your child for the last 3 years, clearly that strategy is not effective.
Not working.
So not only is it not effective, but it also, it can definitely lead to mental health challenges. It can lead to, so depression is sometimes talked about as focusing on the past, right? So it can lead to depression over things that have had, this is all I know of life so far. And anxiety is often talked about as being afraid of the future, right? And so you can get one or the other, you can get both of them. But when kids are receiving a lot of punitive consequences that are artificial, you're gonna get something from that, right? I mean, like, you can't have a kiddo that's, that's threatened and shamed and that kind of thing, and have them turn out emotionally healthy. It's just not really how that works. So let's change gears a little bit. That's a little bit
Tell my
heavy.
check mark story.
Oh, your check mark story.
Check
Okay,
mark
please,
story.
please. Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah, like we were talking about earlier about the me being a cut up in school. I know me and a friend of mine, we used to have a contest to see, because back in the day, 40 years ago, they would write your name on the board and put checks behind your name to shame you. It was a shaming technique.
Mm-hmm. Just like
And
my pulling the card system, right? It's the same thing. It's
the
public
same thing.
shaming.
It's just
Yeah.
shaming. It's public shaming. That's what it
Yeah.
is. It's
Yeah.
to embarrass you in front of the class. But at some point, like I said, I'd become numb to the discipline at home. At the same time, I became numb to the discipline at school. I just became totally numb. So it was a challenge to see how many check marks I could get. And I think my record was like 32 or 33 or something like that. And it was just it was a clear sign that why is this kid determined to stay in trouble? Why is he determined to defy the simplest of instructions? Simplest of instructions. Just sit down and be quiet. I'm not going to do it. When you get done reading your book, close your book and, quietly finish it. I'm not going to do it. I didn't want to do homework. I didn't want to do anything that forced me to
Comply.
comply. Perfect word. And even to this day, I don't like complying.
Mm-hmm.
That still follows me, because the complying is, to me and to other kids that have these diagnoses, is that you're not allowing me to be who I am. I'm not a bad person. I'm not threatening you. I'm not disrupting your world at all. But all I want to do is just be who I am, and you're not allowing that. So we're all going to suffer for this.
No,
And that was my attitude in school.
Yeah, that's a really great way to put it. I hadn't really thought about that connection with compliance before. My program is a very non-compliant program.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing that the kids ever have to do as long as safety is, in check.
Yeah.
But I hadn't really thought of that before, that you can see being expected to be compliant as taking away your authenticity and your identity.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. So I do want to talk about how Delton and I function now, as adults in the world, and then we're going to share our final point, which is actually what we feel like is the most important takeaway from this conversation. The one thing that I would recommend parents really focus on, if you notice any of the things that we've talked about, so like, thinking about Delton's school experience, thinking about my home experience, anything like that, if any of that resonates with you for your kiddo, we want to share the one thing that we would really recommend that you focus on, that we feel like would make the biggest difference. So at this point in our lives, Delton and I are both We didn't know this when we connected. We just found this out, today. We are both intentionally estranged from our families. So
Yes.
basically that means that we have made the choice to not have contact with our families. For me, sometimes I usually don't talk about that. I have been dating, trying to, and so it comes up, right? It comes up when you're meeting. It's actually really awkward because it usually comes up like on a first date or even before a first date. It's just a general question. And so I don't have a relationship with my family, and it's awkward, and people think that's a big red flag. To me, it has nothing to do with the concept of forgiveness. I have forgiven everybody in my life, actually, who have ever I mean, we're all just people living in this world doing the damn best that we can, So it's the things that people do to us are never about us. They are about that person. So my family's inability to nurture me and support me in the way that I needed isn't about me. It's about them not having the knowledge and the tools and the skill set to do so. So I can forgive that, right? There are plenty of things in my life that I have really messed up and done a shit job of. So I can absolutely forgive that. It just doesn't mean I want it to keep happening. So that's where my line is it doesn't mean that I, have a voodoo doll for these people. It doesn't mean that I sit up at night, like wishing them harm. It just means I choose to not have that continue to happen in my life. And at some point, I may make a different choice. At some point, I may decide, to reconnect, and to move forward. As of today, this is where we are. So I just want to be clear that it's not about forgiveness. It's not about being angry. It's not about wishing harm. It's just about me taking care of myself and having people in my life that move me forward in my life. And those are the people that I choose to have in my life, are people that are helping me move forward. So that's my story about that.
And I think with me separating myself from my family was something that I realized later on in life that it's always been there, just because I was always so different. So I was never embedded deep into either sides of my family. I was the only child between my mother and father, and then on top of that, I was just so different as a child, and I'm pretty sure that had something to do with the IQ and all that stuff too. But I started looking back to my childhood, and I realized there was only one person that really showed me unconditional love, and that was my grandmother on my mother's side. That was my grandmother on my
That's
mother's
my
side.
person too.
Yeah, I mean, and when she passed away, it's when I was 16. That set me on a horrible course in life. That's a whole nother podcast. But when she passed away, I went on a downward spiral. I mean, tremendously downward spiral. But I didn't have anybody else in my family that I could even go to even have close to that type of understanding or that type of connection. Not even my own mother. My father was kind of there, kind of wasn't. He was a military guy, so he was. After they divorced, it was kind of just every now and then because he's military. So, but for me, I made the decision because I realized that with the things that I had going on with me mentally, I was forced to grow. It's like if I didn't grow, I would collapse. So I continue to grow, continue to better myself and have a better understanding of me. And I foolishly thought that, okay, once I get myself together, once I get to thinking a little better, everything will be okay. So I tried to reintroduce myself and but then I realized that they're not growing.
Yeah.
And they still look at me like that weird little 10-year-old, that disruptive little 15-year-old. They still have that mindset with me. And I refuse to comply with that thinking of who I am. And for me, it was just a repeated cycle of trying, getting hurt, trying, and that family member I tried with would ghost me. I think that's what the kids say now. They would ghost me, and it started bringing back those old feelings of childhood, of being ghosted as a kid. And it's like, I don't want to feel like this.
Yeah.
And if you guys aren't going to change, I have to push away from you.
Yeah.
And I want parents to realize that at some point, these kids are highly intelligent. My IQ was tested at 142, genius IQ. So eventually at some point, they're going to realize they have to do what's best for them. And if you're not part of that, you won't be part of that.
Yeah. That's a great way to say that. If you're not part of that, you won't be part of that. Yeah. So that brings us to our final point, which is how you can be part of that, how you can be part of, your kid's journey and your kid's growth. So the number one thing that I would say is, whether you're a parent, a teacher, a grandparent, a therapist, whoever you are out in the world, as a sister or brother to a neurodivergent kiddo, the number one thing that I would say is, what our kiddos need is to feel like they're understood, to feel like other people understand them, even if you don't, because I totally get that, right? I think a lot of times, especially in the parent-child and teacher-child dynamic, you maybe completely don't get your kid. But I think the most important thing for them is to feel like you're at least trying to. And I think, Delton and I both, mine was my paternal grandmother, but the thing about my grandmother was that it's interesting you make the comment about the unconditional love, because I have that same concept, right? That I was never in trouble with my grandmother.
Never.
Yeah. And what's so funny though is my grandmother also didn't placate me and coddle me. There was one story. I always had my own sense of style. I always just wore, kind of different stuff. And I really liked shopping at thrift stores. And I remember I used to go stay with her in the summer. She lived on the other side of the country. And one summer I was probably, 15 or something. And we were going to church. And so I had put this outfit on that I knew was, it was different. And so I said, my grandmother had a reputation for being a badass. I mean, like she was an out there kind of woman. And so I said, Graham, is it okay if I wear this to church? And she looked at me and she said, I don't care. You're the one who's going to be embarrassed, not me.
Exactly.
But it's just, like there was nothing, it wasn't rude. I thought it was funny. It wasn't rude at all, but she always just let me be whomever I was. I started getting, when I went off to college, I actually moved to go to school by her. And I started getting tattoos and piercings and all kinds of stuff. And she was always super interested. Like, show me what you did. Show me, what she just always wanted to know, what I had going on. So I think would you say the same about your grandmother, Delton, that you feel like she understood you?
Yeah. And I think the point that kind of come to mind as you tell your story is that for me, it was about acceptance. Yeah. Don't try to change me, and she never did. She never tried to change me. She accepted who I was. She realized who I was. I was this smart kid that was just different. And she was okay with that. I wasn't bad. I wasn't malicious in any type of way, but I was just different.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of kids that have ADHD, they just want to be, I think anybody in life just wants to be accepted. But when you have those socialization challenges, it becomes more and more important. And if you can't connect or you can't be accepted by your own parents, that's a heavy thing to overcome.
Yeah.
And I think my grandmother was my beacon of light.
Yeah.
She was the one I know I can go to, and if I wanted to go over there and not say a word, she was fine. If I wanted to go over there and play cards for 3 hours with her, she was fine. If I wanted to go play in the neighborhood, whatever I wanted to do, she was fine.
Yeah.
It was never questioned. Never questioned. I could come and go as I pleased, and I could come over there anytime I wanted to. And and I felt accepted by her.
Can I up your acceptance game a little bit?
Yes.
I am actually not a fan of the term acceptance because I
Okay.
feel like it's similar to tolerance, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the
Yeah. I
word
totally
that I
agree.
use is appreciation,
Yes.
right? So acceptance is like, yeah, this is who this person is. But appreciation is like, man, this person's super cool. You
And
know?
I learned too on my spiritual journey that appreciation and love have the same vibration.
Mm.
Appreciation and love are the exact same energy. So the appreciation,
And
yeah, she
gratitude.
appreciated who I
Yeah.
was. She loved who I
Mhm.
was.
Yeah.
And these kids just want to be loved.
Yeah.
They don't want to be changed. They don't want to be forced into being anything that they're not. They just want to be loved. They're smart enough to know who they are. They're smart enough to know what they like and what they don't like. And they're not malicious. They're not trying to disrupt the world. They just want to live in their own peacefully.
Yeah.
Peacefully is a big key part.
Agreed.
Mhm.
And look at us, right? We're both out here running our own businesses, doing our own
Yeah.
thing, trying to heal the world, right? But
Yeah.
it's because of what we went through, right? I mean,
Exactly.
both of us do what we do in the world because of what we went through. So obviously on the one hand, it happened, everything happens for whatever. But it's, we're trying to heal the world because we don't want other people to have to keep feeling the way that we have gone through our lives feeling.
Yeah.
You
Exactly.
know?
It's not mandatory that we feel this way because we're different. It's not. We shouldn't feel bad about ourselves because we're different. And I think that's what kind of made me want to take on the life coaching challenges, because it was so many people out there that are down on themselves, or they still don't feel worthy when
Yeah.
there's some of the most awesome people out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of my journey.
All right. Before we go, Delton, I am going to have Delton share how you guys can find him in on the big wide web. Is there anything else that you want to share on the show before we talk about that?
No, I don't think I want to say is just appreciate your kids' differences. No two people are built the same. Just appreciate them. You know, look for the good in them. Don't focus on the bad, because we all had something that's not right to this very day. We all have bad habits or bad tendencies or something, but just love your kids and accept them, and be okay with them being different.
Appreciate their amazingness.
Appreciate it, because they truly are amazing. They truly are amazing, because if they weren't, you wouldn't be watching this podcast. They're amazing. You just can't figure out why they're so amazingly different, but they're still amazing.
Because they're going to make a change in the world.
Yes. Yes. It's a reason. It's a reason for everything.
Yeah. Awesome. Delton, thank you so much for being here. Please tell the people where they can find you. Where do you live on the internet?
Um, Very simple. Facebook is the easiest way to reach me. Just Delton Cooper II. You just send me a friend request or send me a message. I'll get back with you. Or you can just email me at the letter D, coaching, KC at gmail.com. And
Okay.
either one of those guys. I'm not a big social media guy, and I'm working on a YouTube channel, but that's not even close yet.
Yeah.
But either one of those ways are fine. Just reach out to me. Facebook is always the easiest.
Okay.
because they have the
So
messenger and all that. So
we'll put your contact info in the podcast episode, the YouTube episode, and the blog. That way it'll people can connect with you and learn more about you.
and I definitely want to, before I go, I definitely want to say I want adults that have stories similar to myself and Steph reach out to me, because I've walked that journey. I've been through the mental health journey, you know, all that stuff, you know, even with dealing with my own kids and just still not being able to fit in with day-to-day life as we live it now.
Yeah.
Because there's still some challenges and still some adjustments we have to make, you know, because we're so special. So definitely reach out and let's work it out. Let's make your day a little bit brighter.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you for being here, Delton.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining us on this journey. We'll see you guys next time.